record this. And this evening, we are going to have a great presentation by our team here at New Hampshire Lakes, the state of lake health and advocacy in New Hampshire. I do want to go over just a few housekeeping tips, and then we will get going with Michelle and Andrea. So as I just mentioned, the session is going to be recorded. We do ask that you stay muted and keep your cameras off during the presentation. This does help with our bandwidth if there's any issues, and also just any distractions that might happen for our presenters. While we are listening to this great presentation, you can submit questions in the chat box. If you're familiar with Zoom, you should be able to find that either at the bottom or the top of your screen. If we can answer those for you as we're presenting, we will do that. Otherwise, we will save those questions for our presenters at the end, and we will try to get to as many as we can. And you will receive an evaluation form from us. Please do share your feedback, because it certainly helps us to improve our webinars, and we always want to hear what you want to have us do for topics in the future. We are moving to quarterly webinars, but we do plan on having a webinar if there's something timely that we think should be discussed. So keep an eye out for those. You can sign up for our e-news to be notified anytime we do have an upcoming webinar, and there'll be notices on our website. And you do get a link to our webinar recordings. Those are on our website as well. So you can share these with any of your friends or colleagues or family who maybe couldn't tune in tonight at a later date. Just a little bit about us if you're not sure who New Hampshire Lakes is. We're the only publicly supported nonprofit organization working for all of New Hampshire's 1,000 lakes. You can support our work at nhlakes.org on our website. And our mission is to restore and preserve the health of New Hampshire's lakes, which we know need our help right now more than ever. We do that through our programs, our advocacy work, which we're going to hear about tonight from Michelle, our conservation programs, which is our lake host program, making sure we don't have invasive species coming in or going out of our lakes, and our Lake Smart program, which is helping homeowners make steps on their properties to protect runoff water and other threats to our lakes right at the comfort of their own home. And our outreach program, which brings you our webinar series and our annual Lakes Congress program. I am your host this evening, Erin Mastine. I'm our outreach coordinator at New Hampshire Lakes, and we have Gloria Norcross joining us. She's our conservation program assistant. And our expert presenters this evening, Andrea LaMoreaux, president, and Michelle Farnham, our policy and advocacy program manager. And with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to you all. I will stop sharing my screen and take it away.
Okay, Andrea, can everybody see my screen right now?
Yeah.
Okay, let me jump into slideshow mode. And Andrea, you should be in control.
All right, perfect. Michelle and I are getting very tech savvy these days. She's got the presentation up on her screen, and I'm just controlling her screen now. Well, welcome everyone. I'm Andrea LaMoreaux, president of New Hampshire Lakes, and it's nice to see so many friendly names in the list lineup tonight of attendees, and some new folks too. So welcome aboard to those of you who I haven't met yet. So what I'm going to do now is just kick it off and give you just sort of an overview of the state of the health of our lakes and sort of what we saw this summer. And then I'll turn it over to our advocacy expert, Michelle. So we'll just advance. Okay. I always forget there's a delay. Okay. So I always like to start out my presentations with some fun. How many lakes and ponds are there in New Hampshire? Anyone have a guess? You can put it into the chat. And where is my chat? Somewhere. Oh, here it is. There's my chat. Okay, so Laura says 200. Good guess. There are more. For a small state, I feel like we have a lot of lakes. Anyone else have a guess? 300? Oh, Cindy Chandler, 1,000. Ding, ding, ding. If this was in person, I would hand you a prize. There are approximately 1,000 lakes and ponds in New Hampshire. So there's so many. They all have their own character. They all have their own special thing about them. There are truly, let's see here, being very slow. Okay. Oh my goodness. There's something for everyone year round when it comes to New Hampshire's lakes and ponds. Hopefully you all have some pretty fond memories of the past couple months out on the lake, along the water, on the water, in the water, enjoying all that summer has to offer. But we're now as if you're still at your favorite lake, it's pretty beautiful. The leaves are starting to turn, and then we're looking forward to what comes with the next season. So just thinking back, you know, lakes are for swimming, paddling, canoeing, sailing, Hobie cats, motorboats, water skiing, tubing, fishing. Lakes are for dogs too, right? Who has a dog? If anyone has a dog and they love the lake, feel free to share it in the chat. We are a team that loves dogs. I think not everyone, but most of New Hampshire Lakes team has a dog, and they get to visit the lake. But again, lakes are for all of us year round. So much really wonderful opportunities our lakes provide to us. So very important. So lakes and ponds really are an integral part of our relatively high quality of life here. Clean and healthy lakes are super important to our economy, helping to have a healthy economy. And our natural heritage, this is, I think, a picture of some grand inns around 1900s. Families would come and stay for the summer, take the steamboat, and take the railroad, from the big city to New Hampshire, and then take the steamboat to their place on the lake. So we've got lakes are just so intertwined into all that New Hampshire has to offer. New Hampshire is home to some of the cleanest and healthiest lakes in the country. However, our lakes are threatened. They are becoming sick. This is a picture here of someone swimming through some milfoil. If you've never heard of an invasive species, milfoil is a plant you don't want in your lakes. This is someone swimming through some decaying milfoil. So invasive species are species that have come from another part of the world, and they've gotten into our lakes and they're taking over. They don't have any natural predators. So I said we had about 1,000 lakes. We have about 90 lakes that have at least one type of invasive species. So that's, creating, harm. 90 out of 1,000 doesn't sound like a big deal, right? But it's a big deal if one of those 90 lakes with an infestation is your favorite lake, the lake that you love. So this past summer, I will say, just sort of an update on what we saw this summer. We had 2 new infestations in New Hampshire's lakes. So 2 lakes that before this summer didn't have an invasive species, and now, unfortunately, this summer they became infested. And that was Swains Lake in the Raymond area, and another lake, I'm forgetting the name of it right now, but another lake. So 2 more lakes became infested with invasive species. So that is a concern. So this rate of invasive species spread has slowed down over time, but it is still definitely a problem. And this photo here, this is a picture of runoff water. So this is a big sediment plume, looks like kind of milky coffee colored. Our lakes are threatened by when it rains, we have big storms, and things we've done on the landscape have caused sediment, soil to be washed away and into our water bodies. And soil contains pollutants, contains something called phosphorus, the nutrient that makes plants and algae and toxic bacteria grow in our lakes. So not only are our lakes, still threatened by invasive species, they are threatened by runoff water, polluted runoff water. This past summer, we were in a drought. But then when it would rain really hard, big thunderstorms, and that's sort of the perfect storm for bad water quality. So we get really heavy rain, washing away all this soil into our lakes, which has pollutants in it, including that nutrient called phosphorus, again, that makes the plants and the algae grow. So unfortunately, some of you may be familiar with your lake becoming greener or funky colors. Here is a very cute dog, but this very cute dog should not be in this very green lake here. Many of you may have heard about cyanobacteria, toxic bacteria in our water bodies. The past 3 summers, we have had a record number of toxic cyanobacteria blooms in our lakes, and that is a very concerning trend. So we are, when your lake has a toxic bacteria bloom, you may see a sign posted there, or you may get an advisory through an email. The state of New Hampshire will say, hey, folks, you may not want to swim in this water. The toxins in this water can make you mildly sick, or could make you and your kids and your pets very sick. So we're really concerned here at New Hampshire Lakes about the increasing frequency of toxic cyanobacteria blooms. And so that is something that we are, trying to help people understand why it's happening and help people take simple actions to help minimize toxic cyanobacteria blooms from occurring in the future. And we do that through our Lake Smart program, which our Lake Friendly Living program, which Erin was talking about when she opened up tonight. And we also do that in a legislative way. And Michelle will be talking a little bit more about that shortly. So again, we have some of the cleanest and healthiest lakes in the country. However, they are showing, especially these past couple of years, some serious signs of stress. They're really becoming sick before our eyes. And so this is a really urgent time for all of us to find out what we can all do to keep our lakes, or help restore and preserve the health of our lakes. And that means things we do in our daily life. And it also means things that we can do or help do more on the statewide level through education, and also through public policy and advocacy. And again, Michelle will be talking about that in just a second. So New Hampshire Lakes, for those, I know a lot of you on the call today are familiar with us, but for those of you who are new, we are the statewide nonprofit. Erin talked about this before. We're just over 30 years old, and we are working for all of New Hampshire's 1,000 lakes. And our mission actually was recently changed. Our mission used to be to keep New Hampshire's lakes clean and healthy. But we can't pretend anymore that all we're doing is keeping them clean and healthy. We've changed our mission. Our board of directors decided this past June that this really is urgent. We really all need to step up right now and do what we can to restore and preserve the health of our lakes. We can't pretend that they're all healthy. We really need to do some work. And not only do we all here this evening need to do some work to keep them clean and healthy, there's so many more people out there who love a lake, who aren't on this webinar tonight, who we really need to connect with and help them figure out the things that they can do to also keep the lake that they love clean and healthy. So our vision really is, as an organization, is a New Hampshire where all of our lakes are clean and healthy, and caring for them as a way of life. And we're going to accomplish that again through our education programs, through awareness, and also through our public policy and advocacy efforts. And Erin talked about our lake host program. That's how we help boaters take action to prevent the spread of invasive plants and animals. Again, those plants and animals that came from some other part of the world that have gotten here. And boaters can simply clean, drain, and dry their boats to prevent these species from spreading. And our Lake Smart, Lake Friendly Living program, that's another thing folks can do to help minimize their contribution of pollution, minimize that contribution of phosphorus, and to help minimize the amount of those toxic bacteria blooms that we're seeing, that we're also concerned about. And we also do advocacy. And I think with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Michelle. And so you might be able to take control. Let's see here. View options. I'm giving up remote control. So take it away, Michelle.
Great. Thank you, Andrea. So I am the Policy and Advocacy Program Manager here at New Hampshire Lakes. And over the last couple of years, I haven't been spending all that much time at the State House due to the pandemic. But when the legislature is in session, I do spend quite a bit of time monitoring and tracking legislation that's moving through the State House. So there's a number of different ways that New Hampshire Lakes advocates for clean and healthy lakes. I am a registered lobbyist, and I know that is a dirty word in a lot of situations, but it is my job to present our organization's position through verbal and written testimony at the State House during public hearings related on bills that are related to lake health. And so I am the voice of New Hampshire's lakes at the State House, among many other people who show up and they write their legislators and who are concerned about their lakes. So we provide decision makers with educational information and resources, and I serve as a sort of expert on issues related to lake threats and water quality. Beyond that, I also serve as New Hampshire Lakes representative on a number of study commissions and standing committees related to public water access, water related permitting, exotic aquatic weeds and species, and lakes management. And there are also a number of environmental nonprofit roundtables where I gather on a regular basis with other nonprofit organizations around the state who are also doing advocacy work to find common ground and to collaborate on initiatives related to environmental policy. New Hampshire Lakes also supports municipalities in research and understanding what local policies and procedures can be put into place to protect lake health. We also are facilitating a group that we call the Lake Advocates Network that is our representatives from lake associations who meet monthly during the legislative session. And it's our goal to build this grassroots network of lake advocates that can mobilize their larger communities when there are urgent advocacy actions to be taken. So if you're part of a lake association and you're interested in learning more about that, please reach out. And we are trying to grow our network and further spread that reach. And we also participate in state agency rulemaking. So a lot of times legislation directs state agencies to make rules about specific subjects. And when there are lake-related, water quality-related rulemaking opportunities, we take the opportunity to weigh in. So New Hampshire Lakes core advocacy issues are directly related to our program issues. So we advocate on aquatic invasive species prevention and management, polluted runoff water, shoreline and wetland protection. And we also get involved on occasion with on-water uses that have the potential to affect water quality. So I will give you a brief summary next about the 2022 legislative session. We track and monitor dozens of bills throughout the legislative session, and I'm definitely not going to go through all of them because I want you all to still be here when I'm done talking, but I'm going to hit some of the highlights. And I think it should probably come as no surprise to anybody that in light of the surging pandemic, especially in the early legislative sessions, which starts in January, we tried to limit our time physically at the State House. As a reminder, there was no opportunity for remote testimony in public hearings like there was in the 2021 legislative session. You could register your position on a bill and submit written testimony virtually. And I think there are pros and cons to that, focused around out-of-state participation. So without painting with too broad of strokes, this was not a great year for proactive environmental legislation. The legislature sort of generally favored economics and business to environmental protection, and they supported freedom from restriction, which is the New Hampshire way. So, and most votes, I would say, went along party lines. So as I mentioned, we do occasionally get involved in on-water uses that have the potential to impact water quality. House Bill 1071 relative to wake surfing would have required a 250-foot setback for the activity of wake surfing, which is an activity that happens when riders are able to surf the wake behind a boat without the use of a tow rope. So it's different from wakeboarding or water skiing in that they're being towed. So the much larger, more powerful wake is needed for wake surfing. And we know that when produced in certain areas, enhanced waves can erode shorelines, they can disturb lake bottom sediments, and both of those activities can release nutrients into the water, causing those toxic cyanobacteria blooms that we've been talking about, and they can be harmful to wildlife and swimmers and pets. And so the enhanced waves can also disturb fish habitat and bird nesting habitat and pose a danger to people recreating, like I mentioned. So just before the public hearing, a sort of long-awaited study from the University of Minnesota was released, and it studied wave energy, which is the maximum energy, height, and power of the waves. And it used 4 different boats. 2 of them were wake boats and 2 of them were other boats, sort of typical boats operating at their cruising speed. And the study basically found that at least 500 feet are needed for waves to diminish to the same energy from a wake boat as they are from a cruising vessel. So the bill ultimately was killed in the House after a long hearing in February. The opposition of the bill measured on that online portal that I mentioned about 2 to 1 from what we saw, but in-person testimony was pretty evenly split. There's a lot of you here tonight who may have weighed in, whether you emailed your legislators or called them or registered online, and I appreciate that, and I thank you for taking the time to do that. I know that legislative advocacy can be a little bit daunting from time to time. But nearly 700 people signed on in support of the bill, and hundreds of emails were sent to committee members. It was we were talking to some legislators after the fact, and they said that they just couldn't believe the volume of emails that they received. So we're not giving up on finding solutions to environmental concerns related to enhanced waves. At least right now, here in the short term, we don't think that there's a legislative solution, and there's very little legislative appetite for regulation or increased regulation, like I mentioned. So my suggestion, and this is not a solution for all lakes or all lake communities, but get creative. We've heard some stories, some success stories of communities who've taken matters into their own hands. They've developed some plans and some agreements on where to do certain activities to minimize the impact on, both other shorelines and other boats and docks and other recreators. So consider having non-confrontational conversations with people on your lake and find a way to share the lake. And so we also know that the study, unfortunately, did not investigate or directly address environmental harm. So they didn't, although it seems like a very easy direct correlation between more energy and more damage to shorelines, it didn't directly study those impacts. So further study needs to be done to focus on environmental impacts. Right now, the university is fundraising for phase 2 of their study, which is going to focus on prop wash, which is the energy that's directed towards the bottom of the lake from wake boats. And this is particularly interesting because of the way that wake boats operate. They take in ballast water and they lower the stern in the water, which is what allows them to produce this bigger wake. And so naturally, when the back of the boat is lower in the water, it's closer to the bottom of the lake. And so churning up lake bottom sediment is a particular concern, and resuspending that sediment releases more nutrients back into the water, therefore contributing to cyanobacteria blooms. And, keep sharing your stories, talk to legislators, call Marine Patrol if you see boating safety violations. And it's important to talk to both of these groups because they need to have the information that this is an issue if there's ever going to be a legislative remedy for something like this. And we are continuing to work on this issue nationwide. I meet monthly with a group of people from all over the country, from Oregon to Minnesota to Georgia and Maine. We are talking about how different people are tackling and addressing this issue. So I'll move on to something a little bit more positive here. And House Bill 1066 is related to cyanobacteria. And some of you may know that this bill had quite the evolution. And it was amended twice in the House, and it ultimately was passed and signed by the governor. But the bill requires the Department of Environmental Services to prepare a plan to address cyanobacteria blooms. It also establishes an advisory committee made up of 17 or 18 different parties, including state legislators, that is empowered to take some non-regulatory action and weigh in on the DES and cyanobacteria plan that's being developed. And it also allocates some money for outreach and planning for this eventual plan development. So we were heavily involved as an organization in this bill from the very beginning, and we supported the prime sponsor, Representative Rosemary Rung, while she was drafting it. And with the help of that Lake Advocates Network, like I mentioned, and I'm sure a number of you here tonight, we were able to generate hundreds of emails again to legislators throughout the legislative process as it moved from the House through the Senate and then to the governor's desk. And we are named as a member of the advisory committee, which is going to start meeting in just a week or so. Another example of a little bill that could, House Bill 1454, would have required a 5-year setback for the siting of new landfills. And so what this means is that if a landfill were to leak, that it would take 5 years for that spill to reach any surface water. This is meant to be protective of water quality and provide an opportunity for the state and the DES and everybody to try to remediate or minimize the impact of a spill. It ultimately was vetoed by the governor, and the House was able to overturn the veto pretty significantly. And ultimately the veto was sustained in the Senate, where there was not a 2/3 majority that was able to overturn it. But this bill has gotten a lot of attention. It's specifically targeted at a proposed landfill up in North Country in Dalton near Forest Lake. But ultimately this bill would be protective of all of our lakes. And you can see here on the slide, only about 1/7 of New Hampshire would be unsuitable for landfills based on the way that this soil test would be conducted. So all of this is to say that it's an election year, in case you all haven't noticed. I think you'd have to be, living underground to not notice all of the candidate signs and the commercials on TV. But we as an organization are, invested in this election season because all of our state legislators, all nearly 500 of them, are in our congressional delegation, and a lot of municipal officials are up for election in November. So you can give your favorite lake a voice in New Hampshire, whether you vote here or not. I know that some of our supporters are not full-time residents at their lake house, or they just come to visit here for a couple weeks at a time. You can give your favorite lake a voice if you pay taxes, if you visit and spend money here, and if you care about clean and healthy lakes. So your opinions here have value, and your representatives should want to hear from you. So, and I think the other big challenge is that the legislative session happens primarily when people are not enjoying their lakes in nearly as much volume. So I would just urge you to not forget about your lakes during the winter time. So we not only need a group of informed and active citizens, we need a coalition of concerned and supportive legislators to initiate and support and protect lake-friendly policy at the state and local levels. I can show up and I can talk to committee members and to the legislature until I'm blue in the face, but it doesn't matter how many people we get to show up at the State House and how many people send emails and write letters if our position is falling on deaf ears. And we know and we believe that lake-friendly policy should not be a partisan issue. It isn't a partisan issue. And we know that there's an opportunity to grow support on both sides of the aisle for clean and healthy lakes. Just like the national arena, the New Hampshire state legislature has become increasingly partisan in recent years. We've seen that legislators are less willing to cooperate with their colleagues across the aisle, and which has made passing common sense protective legislation, frankly, really difficult. So we decided to develop this Vote Like Your Lakes Depend on It campaign, which has a number of different goals. We want to inspire people to learn which candidates value clean and healthy lakes and help that inform your voting choices at the polls. We know that there's a ton of really important issues that are at center stage, but we also want you to consider what your lakes need when you're casting your ballots. And we also want to really let people that are running for office know that restoring and preserving the health of our lakes is important to their constituents, their communities, and their state. A lot of people with so many representatives, a lot of people don't know they're not experts in every field. And so we need to provide reasons to support lake-friendly policy, and we need to encourage candidates and legislators to take initiative to protect and restore our lakes. And we also want to find more allies at the State House to determine who might be good candidates to help support legislation, or who might be good candidates for commission and committee appointments. This is especially important to me for doing my work. The legislature turns over every 2 years, and with over 400 state reps, it's really hard for one person to develop relationships with all of those people and to get to know who the ones that are in our corner are. So the more information that I can gather in that department, the better. So we have a number of different elements to this campaign. We have a questionnaire and talking points for your conversations with candidates. It's printable. You can print it out on your computer at home or at the library, and it focuses on the issues that are facing our lakes, including cyanobacteria, aquatic invasive species, polluted runoff water, and it provides talking points that you can share with candidates when you run into them at the grocery store, the local watering hole, or at a campaign event. You can connect to a lot of different issues, so that the talking points that we provide are about recreational impacts, about economic impacts, about use and enjoyment impacts. So we try to give well-rounded reasons to support clean and healthy lakes. We're also doing a social media campaign that I hope you all will check out. We are posting about once a week about the Vote Like Your Lakes Depend on It campaign. Feel free to share those posts with your friends and your family and get the word out. When you have conversations with candidates, we really, like I said, would like you to report back to us. If you have a conversation with a candidate and you report back, we'll send you a free t-shirt. And you can find out more about this campaign at newhampshirelakes.org/vote. There's another really great and really important resource that I also wanted to highlight. We partnered with Citizens Count. Citizens Count is a local nonprofit organization here in New Hampshire that it's nonpartisan. It provides candidate bios and contact information. They also send out a survey to all of the candidates. It's optional. They don't have to fill it out, but a lot of them fill out the survey, and it's about a large gamut of issues. So everything under the sun, and they ask sort of for or against positions. And that can give you a lot of information about your candidates. It also provides, like I said, contact information, links to their social media or their website. And there's really helpful voter information, voter registration information, and election day information. You can find out where your polling place is, how to register, etc. And they also include some issue-focused discussions. So we're really excited to be partnering with Citizens Count. They didn't ask a very specific lake-related water quality question, but I think that after partnering with them this election cycle, we will have the ability to encourage them to ask some more water quality focused questions in 2 years. So there are just a number of upcoming dates that I wanted to remind everybody of. November 8th is the general election. And so just following that is a filing period for LSRs. LSRs are legislative service requests. They're sort of a bill before it becomes a bill, but it's what legislators file with the intent to become a bill. It's basically just the title to start with that gives you an idea of what the bill is about. And then they have some time to draft the actual language. So this year is unique in that it is an election year. There was the first LSR filing period was September 6th through the 16th. And so incumbents that are running for re-election are allowed to submit legislation during that period. And then the second period from the 9th to the 22nd of November is incumbents who've been re-elected and newly elected representatives. So legislative service request titles are starting to come out. It can be tricky to decipher what they actually mean or really even start to develop a position statement, but I'm starting to take a look at those and we'll have a lot more information come January. So that's all I have. I'll stop sharing my screen and I will turn it over to Erin if you want to talk about any sort of questions.
Yeah, let me just take a look here. I'm sorry, I was very interested in what you were saying, Michelle. I wasn't doing a very good job of keeping an eye on the chat box here. Let's see. Okay, so Laura asked, do you have an election guide for what legislators support our lakes and environment? And I know you did touch on the Citizens Count. I don't know if you have anything else you might be able to add to that.
Sure, yeah. So the short answer is no, and I'll provide a little bit more context to that. So my answer is sort of twofold. New Hampshire Lakes is a 501c3 nonprofit, and that comes with limitations on our ability to support or endorse candidates. 501c4s are able to do that sort of work, but that's not the kind of organization we are for a number of different reasons. Also with, if you're thinking that generally speaking, we have a two-party system, there's over 400 state representatives. If there's two candidates for each seat, that's well over 400 or 800 candidates. That's a lot of capacity for us. The other thing is that it is quite difficult to determine what candidates' voting records are here in New Hampshire. The committee votes are all recorded, but committees consist of about 20 representatives per committee, or probably 6 or 8 senators per committee. Those votes are recorded, but by and large, most of the votes in the House chamber are not recorded. About 1,000 bills a year are submitted in New Hampshire. Every single one of them gets a public hearing, and every single one of them gets voted on the House floor. So with that many representatives, going through a roll call vote for all of the bills is just not feasible. So a lot of the votes, unless they're particularly contentious, are either just a button yes or no vote or a voice vote. So it's really hard to determine where people's voting records and positions stand.
Great, thank you. Marcia's asking, what committees deal with lake health and legislature?
That's a good question. So primarily New Hampshire Lakes deals with the House Resources, Recreation and Development Committee. We also have some bills that go through the Environment and Agriculture Committee and Municipal and County Government. Occasionally we'll get one that goes through Judiciary, but I would say the bulk of the bills that we are involved in go through House Resources. We also, if they originate in the Senate or they make it to the Senate, there's a Senate Environment and Energy Committee that we deal with predominantly.
Okay, and then let's see here. Laura asked a follow-up question, if we could see how our local reps voted on the bills you spoke about, which you have already answered in your last answer. Marcia's also asking, is there remediation of cyanobacteria in lakes info on the lakes website? And that's a timely question because right now we don't have anything like that in a nice, neat little package where you could easily find it, but we are currently working on a new website where we will have that information available, easy to find. And certainly our Lake Smart program is a great start for any homeowner to help reduce cyanobacteria. Andrea, I noticed that you take your mute button off, so maybe you have something you want to chime in with there.
Sure. Thanks, Erin. Yeah, and I was wondering if Marcia is asking, is anything being done once a lake is blooming with cyanobacteria? And unfortunately, at this point, if a lake starts blooming with cyanobacteria, generally speaking, we have to let it run its course. The bacteria, hopefully, dies after, a few days. But unfortunately, we are finding in some of our lakes that it's persisting for weeks and even a couple months. Generally speaking, it'll get, blown into a wind-blown area. So generally speaking, we have to let nature run its course. However, I will say that the Department of Environmental Services has been working on one New Hampshire water body to, once blooms are happening in that water body, on an in-lake treatment to basically make the cyanobacteria go away. And so more coming on that. They're studying that. And then, but that's really, really what should be happening is that before any in-lake management is happening, so before any sort of chemical or product is put in a lake to basically manage the cyanobacteria, DES wants to make sure that the community has done all it possibly can around that water body to basically keep additional nutrients, keep additional food from coming into that water body. So Again, there is one lake that they've been working on, and I know that we're waiting for the results of that study from DES, and then to see if there's some sort of in-lake management tool that will be developed from that investigation.
Yeah, so it looks like in the chat box, Andrea's done a great job of explaining some of all of this, and have some follow-up with seeing how people are voting. So if there's any more questions, certainly go ahead and add that in there. Let's see, Jim is asking, are there any current initiatives related to polluted runoff? Are we able to track polluted runoff as opposed to runoff which is not polluted?
That's a great question. Michelle, you want to give it a shot?
Sure. Yeah. So I think first of all, it's safe to assume that any runoff in any sort of volume is polluted. So we're thinking polluted runoff water coming from roads. That includes road salt. That includes, you know, your dripping motor oil or fumes, or even, you know, our tires wear down. So there's probably small amounts of tire residue that accumulate on our roads. This is, and then anything that comes off lawns, you know, there's any sort of fertilizer, driveway salt, you name it. And then also natural elements can also be pollutants, like Andrea mentioned. So nutrients that are found in dirt, any sort of construction or development will produce polluted runoff water. So anytime you're disturbing the earth, it'll increase the amount of nutrients that are running into our water bodies. And as we mentioned, these bigger, heavier storms after droughts are just sending lots and lots of volume of water into our lakes. There have been a few bills that were related to polluted runoff water. One of them that's coming to the top of my mind is a bill that would have increased the area or expanded the definition of prime wetlands. And so that, as we know, wetlands are sort of natural filters that protect our lakes and our streams from pollutants, and they filter water. Basically, this bill would have increased the area that's able to be designated as a prime wetland, therefore sort of reducing the development possibilities and increasing buffers around sort of fragile ecosystems. That bill has been introduced in a number of forms over the last at least 3 years and has failed every time. And I think that that's a big, that can be attributed pretty significantly to development and transportation. And there was another bill that I think would have, well, it would have addressed more cyanobacteria, but it would have required, sort of vacation rental properties to notify their renters that there's a place on the DES website that they can find out if there's a current bloom happening in their lake. And that was related to concerns that people don't know what cyanobacteria looks like. They're coming up for vacation, they're renting a house, they're not using a public boat launch, and they're not checking the DES website, so they wouldn't necessarily know that there's a bloom. And so they're recreating in this toxic blue-green algae. So there have been a number of bills related to that, none of which have been terribly successful over the last couple of years.
Okay. Bree over at the Lake Winnipesaukee Association shared a link to an interview with Dave Nels over at DES about a treatment in the lake that Andrea was talking about earlier, so you can check that out. Deborah's asking, is there a specific testing that's available for cyanobacteria blooms before they are in full effect?
I can take a stab at that one. Thanks for the question, Deborah. Generally speaking, cyanobacteria are in all of our waters, but usually in very, very low amounts. Actually, they're one of the first oldest organisms on Earth and are actually responsible for the oxygen in our atmosphere. Kind of cool. But yeah, so they're in basically all of our waters in very low amounts. And so they're generally not a problem until you can see them in bloom form. So in theory, yes, you could test your water for cyanobacteria routinely, but it's, you know, you're going to find it probably, and it's just not going to be an issue. Again, you do want to test when you can see it, when it's in bloom in DES. Once it gets to a certain level of bloom, then they're going to issue an advisory. So it's not a routine, it's not really feasible or cost effective to routinely, standardly test all of our lakes for cyanobacteria, because it is going to be present. But as soon as you think that a bloom is happening, then the Department of Environmental Services will be, testing. And there are some programs in which communities through the University of New Hampshire are being equipped with tools and microscopes to do sort of their own monitoring, because as you can guess, the state, has a very a small team to get to all of our lakes. So if you guys are interested in setting up sort of testing at your own lake, we can certainly put you in touch with folks at UNH who can help help your group set up a cyanobacteria monitoring team.
Thank you, Andrea. Susan is asking, is there support for a salt reduction bill?
So a couple years ago, there was a bill passed that allows for a Green Snow Pro certification. What this does is it allows for private contractors to take some training through DES on salt usage reduction. And it in turn, after you as a company, a private company, and your employees get certified in salt reduction, it gives you a limited liability protection. And so basically what was happening is companies were so worried about slip and fall accidents, which, if you're walking across a parking lot at night in the winter time and you slip and fall, companies were worried about getting sued for people's injuries related to that. And so they were just dumping like obscene amounts of salt on the ground. And basically, my understanding of the situation is that you shouldn't be seeing salt on your driveway, in your parking lot, but they were dumping so much salt because people thought that if it wasn't visible, that it wasn't there, it wasn't working. So this has helped with companies that are plowing parking lots, that are commercial plowing companies that are coming to people's driveways, schools, etc. There is also a municipal snow pro program that is set to be going through the rulemaking process, but that's upcoming. And so municipalities already have that sort of limited liability, so it's not as urgent of a process. And I see that you're asking about state roads. There is not specifically a program targeted at that, although, and I don't know, Andrea, if you have any more that you wanted to add about sort of state level salt reduction. But I know that you can request, or that certain areas you'll be driving near a lake that are signed as salt reduction areas.
Yeah, I'll just add, thank you, Michelle, for that. A community can request, I believe it's called a reduced winter maintenance area, something like that, on a state road. And you would basically request that the department use less salt or use no salt in certain areas, and you'd have to sort of make your case, and then they would, the state would have to look at that and see if they would grant that. So there is a process for communities to request that, and I will see if I can find that and post it in the chat.
Before we do sign off, I did want to mention, I can't remember, Michelle, if you talked about this or not, but we are offering on our website right now, if you go and pledge in good faith that you're going to vote like your lakes depend on it, we will send you a free sticker. I don't know if you can see it here very well. A fun, it's always hard with these green screens, but it's a vote like your lakes depend on it vinyl sticker. And we'll just send that to you for free if you go and make that pledge on our website at the nhlakes.org/vote. And Michelle also put that in the chat as well. Thank you, Michelle. Okay. Let's see, Jim is asking, do legislators appreciate the environmental importance of wetlands? Are there initiatives to restore wetlands?
I would say that legislators, by and large, don't understand the value of protecting and restoring wetlands. I think that for a very long time, wetlands have been treated as and perceived as undesirable land, and there's been a lot of effort to fill them in and to get rid of them. So that's what's so important about this campaign. And New Hampshire prides itself on being a citizen legislature. So legislators are not professional legislators. They're doctors, they're farmers, they're school teachers, they're parents who stay home with their kids. They're anybody and everybody. And so they can't be expected to be experts on the issues at all times, and they don't have staff members. And so they don't have people that are doing all kinds of research for them and presenting them with cliff notes on the issues and on the bills. So that's why it's so important for you all as constituents and as people who love their lakes to reach out to their legislators and give them the information that they need to make informed decisions. And so that's why this Vote Like Your Lakes Depend on It campaign is so important, is to get legislators to understand what issues are facing our lakes and to commit to making lake-friendly policy choices. But I would say by and large, legislators are not experts on most topics, lakes or otherwise. And so that's why it's really important to be reaching out and having conversations with them.
Great. It looks like Andrea was able to find that link. Thank you, Andrea. So like I mentioned before, this webinar was recorded, so we will have this up on our website. And because we shared so many important links, I will go ahead and share the chat as well for you to reference if you're looking for one of those resources after the fact. And I think, unless there are any last minute questions here or anything else Michelle or Andrea want to mention after we've had such a great conversation.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. Thank you, Erin, for having us on tonight. And thank you all of you for tuning in. And please, reach out with any questions you have. Michelle, we're just so lucky to have Michelle on our team. She's so knowledgeable. And if you have any advocacy related questions, Michelle is your go-to person. And if she doesn't know the answer, she'll find it out and get back to you as soon as she can. So thanks in advance for getting out there and talking to our candidates. And with your help, I think it'll be a long process, but over a period of years, we may actually help influence a more lake-friendly legislature. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you both for such a great conversation. Even as part of the team, it's always good to get a refresher. So I want to wish everybody a good evening. And with that, we will go ahead and sign off. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good night.
Good night.